everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today for one of our AT&T focused webinars here at the Retirement Group. My name is Samantha, and I am the moderator of these webinars. Retiring in 2023 versus 2024 can have some enticing incentives. Our advisor, Tyson Mayvar, will be on in just a second to discuss some of the factors you should consider, including interest rates and inflation, and find out how these things could affect your lump sum from AT&T so that you can make the decision that best suits your future in retirement. But before I bring Tyson on, I would like to very quickly remind you that although we work very closely with both active and retired members of AT&T, the Retirement Group is not affiliated nor endorsed whatsoever by AT&T. We are a completely independent group of financial advisors here, so please keep that in mind. After Tyson's presentation, I will jump back on with him very quickly to ask him any of the questions you may have entered into the chat throughout his presentation. Please feel free to ask away. It is completely anonymous, and Tyson will answer as many questions as he can, time permitted. And with all of that out of the way now, let's bring on our speaker today, Tyson Mayvar. Hey, Tyson.
Hi, Sam.
Hey.
Thank you, folks, for attending our webinar series today. My name is Tyson Mayvar. I'm one of the AT&T focused retirement advisors for the Retirement Group. And on today's webinar series, we're going to cover what we think to be some of the most important issues related to picking a time to retire from AT&T. For many of the people, hundreds of people that we've talked to this year, approaching their transition, but forced with some unsettling changes, to say the least, for many people. And then now we have interest rates climbing once again that are affecting the lump sum. So quite a bit to talk about today. We'll get right in it. Those of you who aren't as familiar with our company, the Retirement Group is an independent group of financial advisors that specializes in working with corporate employees. AT&T being one of the companies whose employees we've helped for the longest, going over 30 years now, in helping folks to plan for retirement, transition into retirement, and manage their retirement assets. We actually manage retirement investment accounts for AT&T employees, as well as employees of many other Fortune 100 companies across the country. And we have a variety of complementary services that we encourage you to take advantage of, whether or not you are a client yet, or even are considering become a client. There are a variety of ways that we believe that we can help you put together a stronger, higher probability of success in retirement, whether that's soon or not soon from AT&T. And today's discussion is going to be on those of you that are getting close and are having some decisions to make within the next month and a half as we get close to the end of the year here. Now, we talk to folks, when we build this retirement plan, we put together this checklist that we want to make sure that we've gone through before feeling confident in our retirement plan. And at the top of that checklist is understanding our emotions, the emotions that drive our decisions, not just how we invest money, how we pick stocks, how we allocate our investment portfolio, but also how we plan for a retirement. The retirement date is very emotionally driven in many cases. I spoke with somebody earlier today who really wants to be debt-free in retirement and is, or at least originally was not comfortable leaving his paycheck until he had no debt. Come to find out that he's paying 2.5% on a mortgage that he owes a little over $250,000 on. And his goal was to have that paid off in the next 3 years. Where when we talked through it a little bit, we were able to understand that in reality, it's actually better for him to pay that off a little bit slower, given what his safe investments are paying, more than 5%, and also have some tax benefits in paying that off slower that'll actually create more wealth for his retirement plan. So we think of this as an emotional decision because of the emotional incentive to be debt-free, whereas the reasonable decision in his case was to pay that off as slowly as possible. We see this all the time in our business. A lot of times it has to do with retirement dates. Retiring too soon is fairly common. People can't afford to. And not retiring soon enough, as it turns out. And we've seen this in the last couple of years where AT&T has changed the benefits. Interest rates have climbed and eroded many people's pension lump sums. So we want to get to understand what is in somebody's long-term best financial interest, and it doesn't always match up with what is the most comfortable decision emotionally. Now, ultimately, we also want to reduce the probability of permanent loss of capital and increase the probability of success in a retirement plan, which for most people is defined by not outliving their assets, not running out of money in retirement. But there's also different sub goals and objectives for people beyond that. And it might have to do with estate planning. It might have to do with not overpaying in taxes, might have to do with healthcare costs and concerns related to those. And so all of those come back to just putting together the best, most sound financial plan possible that removes or at least reduces our probability of not running out of money in retirement. Some of that has to do with picking a sound investment strategy, but a lot of it has to do with making good decisions on your benefits and avoiding big tax mistakes. Increasing retirement income is a big deal for a lot of people, just having the most comfortable retirement plan possible. Under one condition, that it's still sustainable, that they don't run out of money. You could have a very, very good first couple years of retirement, but then run out of money too quickly. So we want to balance those and do the best we can, removing some of the biggest mistakes possible, like paying too much in taxes, leaving money on the table, and not being flexible in the retirement plan to pivot from time to time when some of the environmental changes come our way, such as higher interest rates, higher inflation, lower lump sum payouts, the company forcing you to move or go back to work in the office where you might have enjoyed a remote working experience for the last several years. And then ultimately, we want to understand you and anybody who becomes our clients. We want to understand what is important about your retirement, develop a philosophy of why we're investing this money in the first place. For some, it's just to make sure there's more money down the road to reduce the probability of running out of money. For others, it's being able to have more freedom and security in their retirement. Maybe it's important that you take care of somebody in your retirement, or there's other people that'll be relying on you financially in retirement. We need to know all about these things when we build this plan so that we can provide suggestions about other issues that you might not have realized were even related, such as the timing of your transition from AT&T, location that you decided to both work at the end of your career as well as retire in, and many of the other decisions that you'll have related to your benefits plans and your retirement decisions in general. So today we're going to talk about a few different things. We're going to talk about this return to office policy and push that AT&T has been making. We'll talk about the interest rates that affect the lump sum and what we anticipate there. We're also going to talk about inflation, recently the impacts of inflation, and going forward, how potential future inflation can affect some decisions. The 401k, especially the tax issues related to the 401k plan, and the rollover decision that you have when you leave the company. And then some of the bigger mistakes that we've seen people make over the last 30 years that our company has been helping people from AT&T, and some ways that we believe might minimize the impacts of certain mistakes, and what people have told us was the most successful part of their retirement journey. Now, everybody's situation is different. This is one of the primary reasons we run a cash flow analysis, to understand the big picture of your plan. But some of the bigger sources of funds we find most retirees from AT&T have: Social Security, a real estate, whether that's rents from an investment property or the equity that you have in your residence, the pension plan from AT&T, whether taken as a lump sum or one of the various annuity options, and then the 401k that you were responsible for saving into, and will have even more flexibility in how you invest that money after you leave the company. Now, this return to office policy, this has been on everybody's mind. This has been probably the #1 hot button for people that we talk to. Everybody's affected by this differently. Some people have had no impact, at least yet, based on this, but they're concerned that there will be a future impact based on the direction the company is going with this. I have some clients that took a voluntary severance package because they were anticipating having to move to another city or even another state. And they took a package earlier in this year so they could kind of control the dynamics a little bit better. And many people that, as we approach the end of this year, this is going to be when they have to say goodbye to the company because they weren't interested in moving, or they are having to uproot at least themselves and maybe their family, go move somewhere else, at least for a couple years, at least until they find a better situation or until they reach their mod 75 and service pension eligibility. So a lot of different circumstances at this point, but it seems that everybody is affected or impacted by this to some degree, at the very least, because they might be losing some coworkers or there's a switch in how things are done in their group or division of the company. So these return to office mandates have put a lot of people into a situation where they're moving to one of these major hubs. There's 9 main hubs around the country. And I live in Texas. Dallas is one of the larger hubs. I have clients all over the country, though, not just clients here in Texas. And there's actually probably going to be more people working at AT&T in Texas than there has been previous as a result of many people moving to Dallas. But it's not just Dallas. El Segundo, New York, New Jersey. Atlanta is another very big hub that I've heard from a lot of people all over the country, mostly on the East Coast, but many people from different segments of the country, even in Central and West Coast, being moved all the way out to Atlanta, which is a big change for a lot of people. And so it wasn't in the cards for everybody to do this. And for whatever number of reasons that you might have had to stay with your job because you didn't want to go find a new one, or because you felt that you weren't financially or psychologically prepared to retire from AT&T, which is for a lot of people, or just go do something else, which was the case for also a lot of people. And the company has been honoring severance packages for those that were displaced as a result of this force to move to another city, which was the case for a lot of people. 60,000 workers, it was estimated, have been affected by this. And many people calling this as a disguised layoff, which I would put past AT&T based on the history of especially the last 20 years of reducing headcount in a number of different strategies. We used to be giving offers or benefit enhancement, like we saw for managers in 2014 and 2015, where they allowed the employees to use a lower interest rate. If they left the company, they could get a bigger lump sum. Well, now it's not a benefit to leave the company. Now it seems to be an incentive to leave the company based on what's happening with the locational changes for a lot of people. And it's affected the career paths of a lot of people. For many people that expected to be able to just continue to work from home or continue to work in the city that they've been in for maybe several decades, that was flipped on its head this year. And we're expecting this to have a ripple effect and affect not just other areas of the industry, but throughout the country. Many employers we're anticipating are going to start taking a page out of AT&T's playbook and forcing people not necessarily to move to a different city, but at least return to the office, return to work, even if it's just for 3 days a week or some number of hours per week that are required. We're anticipating that to come back as the concerns over a pandemic and other concerns, other reasons that people were working from home have to some degree dissipated over the last year. So we'll expect more of this going forward. And we also expect more changes at AT&T. Who knows what the next one's going to be? Likely a change in benefits plans. Those have been going on for years now, and unfortunately they haven't been getting better. So just stay tuned with these announcements that AT&T are having, and try to be dynamic in your retirement plan is the best advice we have to make it easier to pivot when something comes our way that we might not have necessarily anticipated. Just like, for instance, how you're taking your pension. Interest rates having gone up, eroding the lump sum values, but for most people not changing the annuity payouts. Somebody who had a flexible plan and was prepared to take either benefit payout option is going to be better suited to swallow or to deal with that change that's happened that we might not have necessarily expected. A quick and rampant rise in interest rates just in the last 2 years. Now, there's been a lot of different changes that have affected AT&T employees specifically, and we've been working with people this year to update their plans. Some of these people are our clients that are doing a test run of our services, had the retirement group manage a small portion of their 401k before they retired, just to see if it was a good fit to work with us, which, you know, we certainly can't guarantee it's going to be a great fit for whatever reason. We hope that we provide an excellent service to you if you decide to entrust your assets with us at retirement. But we recommend everybody, whether it's with us or one of our competitors in the industry, start a relationship before you retire so that you can start to identify if that's a good fit. And here's an example of when folks have had to completely change their original plan. You might have planned to work till you had 30 years with the company or until you reached 55, which was your Mod 75 milestone, or until you had your house paid off, like the gentleman I mentioned earlier from the story, or any number of catalysts that you might have been planning for. And unfortunately, this is one of those examples of many that it makes sense to have a dynamic retirement plan where you start to compare, well, what if I leave AT&T this year? I go get a part-time job that's making half of what I was making at AT&T. I need to find out what I'm going to do about health insurance. So let's evaluate those options. What's the net difference in my plan? We need to run a cash flow analysis to truly understand that. And interestingly enough, there's some people, two of my clients specifically this year, that although these changes were very concerning up front, both of these individuals, one raised their hand to take a package in the summer of this year. The other one was forced to leave the company, an involuntary surplus. Both of whom are already working again before the year's over. Both of them still have money from their severance package still left over, and they both found jobs. One of them is actually making more money. The person that was in a surplus situation that didn't want to go but was forced to leave, he's making more money, and he's actually happier in the position that he's in. His commute is shorter. It was a blessing in disguise for him to have to leave the company. The other gentleman not making more money, but having a lot less stress is what he's told me. Unfortunately, this is not ideal to have to make all these big decisions under duress, to go put your resume out there, update your resume, go look for work. The severance package helps, but 6 months comes quickly, we found. So putting this together ahead of this decision-making time helps to reduce the probability of a mistake being made, because we never want to make any big life decision under duress. And unfortunately, this is what AT&T forces a lot of people to do as a result of some of these policy changes. Now let's talk about some of these benefit plan changes. If you are somebody who's considering the lump sum, it's important. A couple things are important. First, you need to know which pension plan you're on, because each pension plan is affected by interest rates differently. Sometimes rising interest rates help your benefits. They will grow the annuity payout. For the vast majority of people at AT&T, rising interest rates hurt your lump sum payout. This is why we talk so much about these interest rate changes. To the tune of about 8 to 12% decrease in your lump sum for every 1% increase to these interest rates. And there's 3 of them, remember, that we track, that AT&T uses based on corporate bond interest rates, call them the segment rates. These rates update monthly on the IRS website, but it's only the November months that matter as it pertains to the AT&T pension lump sum payouts. And so here we are in November. We won't have these rates published until typically the 3rd week and sometimes the 4th week of December, which for a lot of people is too late as it is to make a decision, especially legacy T employees. You actually need to have a benefit commencement date of December 1st or earlier in order to enjoy the 2023 lump sum interest rates. If you retire in December as a legacy T employee and as an employee of several of the union or regional pension plans around the country, December 1st is the last available commencement date. And if you retire in December, your next available commencement date is January 1st, which unfortunately is in the next interest rate year. And unfortunately, this year, we're anticipating rates will be higher. So you may need to put an election in to retire by November 30th. Other employees, if, for instance, you're on the non-bargain program, I work with a lot of Legacy S, Southwestern Bell Corporation employees who are on the non-bargain plan, and there's a lot of others, Ameritech, Pac Bell. If you're on the non-bargain program, you can actually retire as late as December 30th, because that program allows for you to have a benefit commencement date the day after your retirement date or the 1st of any future month. But this gives you a little bit more time to put in your commencement, or at least to retire later in the year, versus having to retire by November 30th when you don't even know what the interest rates are going to be for the next calendar year. Something else, you can actually put an election in retirement in Fidelity, and you will get an extension on how long you have to that election is good, which gives you time to figure out what the rates are going to be, even if you don't end up pulling the trigger on that retirement date. At least you have one input into the Fidelity website so that if you do retire on that date that you have a saved calculation for, you can execute that election, that benefit commencement election. So these are just little tricks of the trade that we've learned over the last 30 years working with AT&T employees, why we strongly encourage you to work with somebody who has a few clients from AT&T so that you can get the benefit of the perfect retirement date that's going to allow you to not leave any money on the table and not have any tax consequences of these decisions when you roll out your assets. Let's zoom in on the interest rates for 2023 in yellow here. You can see these are based on November of 2022 corporate bond interest rates. There's 3 of them. The second segment rate, as it turns out, carries by far the most weight in this calculation. So we paid the closest attention to the second segment rate, which was 5.60 last year. And if you retire and commence your benefit this year, that is the rate that is going to calculate your lump sum. And you can see as of October of this year, which was just recently published last week, those rates have gone up what we call 54 basis points, 0.54%. So if we take the logic from the last slide, every 1% increase is a 10% drop in the lump sum, roughly. That's about a 5.5% drop for the average person. Could be more, could be less, which is a function of your life expectancy and your age. The younger you are, the more severe these interest rate increases have as an impact on your lump sum. But let's call it anywhere from 4 to 7%, as I bet. If rates are unchanged from October to November, what people will be losing on their lump sum, 4 to 7% potentially. Now, of course, November interest rates could come out higher or lower than October. We just use this as a guide so we could prepare for potentially pulling the trigger for somebody who is close to that timing decision or who is going to be leaving anyway and they just weren't sure, should I wait to take my pension into next year, which you absolutely can do. You could have already retired this year but waited to take your pension because you were hoping that rates would be lower and that your lump sum would be higher. Unfortunately, that just wasn't the case this year. We saw rates continue to climb throughout the year to a point where now they are higher than they were last year, and we're anticipating lump sum drops for the vast majority of AT&T employees. We also show the rates, what they have come from in the last 6 years, going back all the way to the 2017 November interest rates. They went up in 2018, but then they fell in part as a result of the pandemic and some monetary stimulus that dropped interest rates to historical lows that produced historically high lump sum payouts. And unfortunately, those days are behind us. And we never know. We could go back to an environment, if we have some issues in our economy, we go into a recession in the next couple of years, it's possible the Federal Reserve could reduce interest rates again. And they don't have complete control over corporate bond interest rates, but they do have some control in their open market operations and how they affect interest rates in an effort to either stimulate the economy or curb inflation, which has been the #1 priority over the last 2 years. The priority could be to stimulate the economy in future years, which means we could see lower interest rates in the future. And this needs to also be considered on not only the timing decision of taking your lump sum, but also the timing of your retirement. And those two things don't have to coincide. There are some plans, I will mention, though, that force you to take your pension within 90 days of your retirement date. So not everybody has flexibility to just defer their pension decision for 5 or 10 years if you want to. So again, something to talk to us about. If we run your cash flow analysis, we'll help you pinpoint all of the opportunities you may have based on which plan you're on. And then here's just a bar chart of that recent table that we showed, where we saw rates were climbing up until 2019. Then they dropped pretty dramatically, especially that first segment rate, but all 3 rates. And then now they've almost converged to over 5% in 2023. And we're seeing that be likely even higher on all 3 interest rates that affect the lump sum payouts at AT&T going into 2024. Now, what we found also is that inflation is correlated with interest rates. It was not unique this last year. We saw inflation start to rear its ugly head, and of course, interest rates followed. And this is very common in history. And fortunately, many fixed income investments do poorly in environments of both rising interest rates and inflationary environments. And we're talking about specifically the bonds you have in your retirement portfolio, whether that's your money at Fidelity or you have some outside IRAs or Roth IRAs, or maybe even non-qualified brokerage accounts. This has been a tough reality for a lot of retirees that were hoping that the bond side of their portfolio was safe. Unfortunately, interest rate increases erode the value of bonds in the short run, but in the long run actually increase the payouts on those bonds. And eventually there is a break-even point on that. But to see a portion of your portfolio fall because the stock market has fallen, fall because interest rates have gone up and your bonds have become less valuable, and then, oh, by the way, your lump sum pension has fallen because interest rates are higher. This has hurt a lot of people's anticipated quality of life in retirement. And it's just an important time to revisit the retirement plan to see how we can make up for this. It might mean you need to work a little bit longer than you originally anticipated. It might mean you need to cut back on the budget now in preparation for higher expenses in the future, which actually has a double impact, positive impact. When you can save more in your 401k now, you not only increase the amount of money you have to retire on, of course, but you reduce what you're used to spending, which is helpful leading into retirement to start to condition yourself to maybe a leaner lifestyle once you get to that point where you are financially independent and no longer have a paycheck coming from AT&T or wherever it might be. And we have also some tax implications that we want to cover today too, because many of our clients are leaving the company prior to 59 and a half. So what are your options to get access to your money in the cheapest environment possible from a tax perspective? Well, usually when you pull money from a retirement account like an IRA or 401k or pension, because these are qualified retirement accounts, if you pull money prior to 59 and a half, it's federal income taxes, state income taxes if you live in a state that taxes retirement account withdrawals, and an additional 10% early withdrawal penalty on top of all those taxes. So there's some people that we're working with that would otherwise be subject to more than 40% taxes based on all of these things compounding, which completely deteriorates the retirement plan. So how can we avoid some of these penalties? Well, there's a lot of exceptions to the early withdrawal penalty. The biggest one, you see this list of 9 different exceptions. The biggest one has to do with the IRS tax code under 72T. And there's actually 2 different forms of this exception. One is if you worked with AT&T until the year you turn 55, you could take penalty-free withdrawals from your 401k. You have to have left the company on or after the year you turned 55, though. You can't leave when you're 53 and just wait 2 years to start taking money out of your 401k. It doesn't work like that. So that's the most flexible one because you can change the amount that you're taking out. You can take monthly withdrawals. For non-management employees, it's not as flexible because they only let you take out money 4 times per year. For management employees, you can take out money 8 times per year, anytime, as well as have monthly distribution. So really up to 20 times per year, very flexible for managers. And this is why a lot of people that have left AT&T prior to 59 and a half, we encourage to leave their money in their 401k. Of course, we'd love them to roll it over to Schwab, which is the custodian that we use, and do some business with us, but it doesn't always make sense based in many cases on this exception rule. There's another one if you don't qualify for the post-55 rule that allows you to have substantially equal periodic payments. That's also in the IRS code 72T. It's not as flexible, and oftentimes the payouts aren't as high as if you qualify for the post-55 exception, but it is a good way to get penalty-free income that works for a lot of people, especially lately because the higher interest rate environment has produced higher allowable withdrawal rates under the 72T payout schedule. So for example, we set one up earlier in the year for a client that had just over $1 million committed to this 72T arrangement, and he was able to get, I believe it was $72,000 a year gross from his IRA, and he's only 53. So there are some options here. A lot of cases, it's just to supplement income from another job, especially if you're retiring as young as 53. Just to have a sustainable plan, you might need to work, even if it's just on a part-time basis. But the 72T and post-55 can create some income to supplement some other income you might have from a full or part-time job, or maybe your spouse he or she is still working. And this could create some good tax incentives to set up this schedule, even though it's a little bit more unique, not having to just pull money out flexibly from a retirement account like an IRA. But there's definitely things you want to be aware of before making decisions, like, for instance, to roll over your 401k to an IRA or to roll over your pension to an IRA. We have actually recommended this year several clients roll over their pension lump sum into their 401k to give them more flexibility to do strategies like the one that we've just mentioned. So these are all options that we strongly encourage you to be very well educated on before making any of these irrevocable decisions on what to do with your money. If it does make sense to roll over either your 401k or your pension lump sum into an IRA, there are no taxes on that rollover. You get to continue deferring taxes until you start withdrawing money from that IRA. There's a variety of reasons you might consider the IRA: more investment options, more flexibility with your tax withholding, more frequent withdrawals allowed. A lot of reasons, maybe because you want to hire an advisory firm like the Retirement Group or one of our peers in the industry, because you realize that the stakes are very high when it comes to this retirement plan that you're putting together. But like we mentioned, it doesn't always make sense, but it is helpful to understand the tax implications when you pull money out. And in some cases, it makes sense to try to stretch withdrawals over multiple tax years. For example, I talked to somebody today. He wants to pay off about $200,000 of debts, things like cars, toys, like they have a side-by-side. Not his home, and that's what I asked him first, because usually the mortgages are much lower interest rates. Credit cards, though, often can make some sense, especially these days when they're north of 25% a year annual percentage rate. But if you pull out 200,000, like in his case, all in the same tax year, it could throw you into a higher tax bracket. And if you could stretch it out over 2 or 3 tax years, the total taxes paid could be substantially less. And we have to make that calculation of how do we minimize both the interest paid to the lender as well as the taxes paid to Uncle Sam, and try to be as strategic with that payoff as possible. There's a lot of mistakes that can be made here, but here's a list of what some of our clients have told us are important to them about who they decide to work with in retirement. Making sure that their company understands a little bit about their AT&T benefits plans. I'm not saying they have to have 30 plus years experience like the Retirement Group does, but it's probably not a bad idea to hire a firm that has helped at least a couple people retire from AT&T and has a little bit of insight into some of the pitfalls to avoid as you transition from the company. Make sure you understand the cost of the service as well as the benefits that you get from the service. It's probably not a good idea to hire the most expensive advisor. Might not be a good idea to hire the cheapest advisor either, because just like with many things in life, you get what you pay for. So understand what value you're getting. If it's purely just rebalancing your portfolio, that's not expensive for people to do. In fact, they have machines and algorithms do that today for free. So you probably don't want to be paying anything or much of anything if that's all your advisor is doing. But you may have other value propositions that you might consider looking at, such as assistance with the tax and distribution strategy, behavioral coaching, which is like what we talked a little bit about today, my conversations with my clients, and trying to look at the big picture as opposed to what feels the best. And the two aren't always aligned. What type of skill sets or specialties does your advisor have? Do they understand your health plan? Do they understand retirement tax code? Do they understand a different investment philosophy other than just rebalancing periodically and indexing, which is a very easy investment philosophy, but not necessarily the best one in our opinion? Do they have a user-friendly website? Do they have a easy-to-read statement? Do they have a third-party custodian? A very important, I mentioned earlier, we use Charles Schwab for our clients. That's where they keep their assets. Fidelity, great custodian. Vanguard, great custodian. Probably don't want to go with an advisory firm that does not have a third-party custodian and they're printing their own statements and are essentially telling you whatever they want to in terms of how much money you have on a day-to-day basis. So all these things is part of the process of getting to know your advisor, shopping around for different advisor firms. We're not going to be the best fit for everybody. We think we have a pretty compelling story on why you might consider at least talking to us and having us run a plan for you. And like I mentioned earlier, probably not a bad idea to do a test run of a firm's services with a smaller amount of money before you retire, so that you can find out if the proof is in the pudding, if they can do what they said they could do for you, if it's a good relationship and the communication is good, if the advice is good, if the performance on the investments is good. That's probably a pretty important one as well. And we'll offer a smaller minimum for people that are approaching retirement that just want to see if it's a good fit prior to retirement. So consider that, but definitely take advantage of the complimentary cash flow analysis, no charge. All we ask is that you spend a few minutes with us on the phone, and we'll do it either an in-person or a web meeting to go through the results with you and give you some pointers on what we think are things you should be considering as you approach some of these big life decisions, whether it's to leave AT&T, whether it's to take your pension as a lump sum or as an annuity, or the hundreds of other decisions you'll have in building this retirement strategy from AT&T. Unfortunately, they tell us that the statistics say 74% of Americans over the age of 50 don't have a written plan for their retirement. This baffles me every time I read this, especially because you can get one for free from a number of different companies that are hoping to earn your trust and your business one day. Spend some time on this. I can't think of a better investment of time for somebody approaching retirement than to put together a plan and a cash flow analysis so that when those decision timeframes come, you know that you've done your due diligence and it's just a less stressful transition, whatever the decision is, to leave AT&T or a number of other decisions that you'll have as you build this retirement plan. So if you're willing to spend some time with us, we're happy to spend some time with you. A way that you reach out to us is through email. Our email address is info@theretirementgroup.com. Any questions you have or to request a meeting, you can call us at the home office at 800-900-5867. Take a picture of this QR code here on the left to schedule a direct meeting with myself or one of my colleagues that understand the AT&T benefits. And you can also follow us on LinkedIn just to keep up with the content that we're producing related to the AT&T retirement strategies or generic retirement, tax, investment, and estate planning strategies as well. So with that, we're going to wrap it up. But Sam, if we did have any questions, I'll pass it back to you and we'll see if we can get to a few of them.
Hey, Tyson. Yes, let's answer just a few questions because we're running a little short on time today.
Sure.
This first one, can you think of any other strategies not previously mentioned to protect my and my spouse's financial decisions from the effects of inflation?
Yeah, I would say call us to get a plan done, but inflation's a big one when you're, like, for instance, deciding how to take your pension. The AT&T annuity is not adjusted for cost of living increases. So potentially the lump sum could be a better way to go to hedge against inflation under a couple conditions. One, you have to invest the money, right? You can't put it under your mattress. And number two, you have to manage that money. In other words, you can't overspend. And that, unfortunately, is a problem for some people, wherein the annuity is sort of forced discipline. So that's one example of a way that you can help to reduce the negative impacts of inflation by investing in assets that appreciate over time to hedge against inflation, like stocks or businesses. And there's a variety of other investments that act well as an inflation hedge. But there's a bunch of decisions that we would need to run your cash flow analysis before we could say what was likely the best route for you to take given your circumstances.
All righty, thank you. Number two, I plan to leave AT&T in 2024, but I don't want to retire completely. Should I consider leaving this year and take a lower paying job elsewhere?
Maybe. Yeah, I would ask that person why 2024. If there was specific reasons, like the job wouldn't be available until 2024, for example. Or you weren't mod 75 until 2024. That would be worth knowing as well. But the reasons you might consider leaving this year versus next year is if there's any possibility you may take the lump sum, you might be able to get more money this year versus next year, even given that you don't have a job until September, for example. But again, we would need to know more details about this person's situation to say for sure.
All righty, Justin. We're going to do one more. How can I make a financial plan that takes into consideration unforeseen costs like healthcare increases that can impact my savings from AT&T?
Yeah, great question. And look, there's no way to predict the future, so you're never going to have the perfect retirement plan. But the best retirement plan, in our opinion, is one that is dynamic. It's not impossible to shift when things change, such as what was made as an example in this question, healthcare costs. Everybody has different concerns, though. We have open ears for those concerns. A lot of people that we talk to have concerns because of that, whether it was a friend or family that had some kind of a long-term care need, and that's at the top of their list, or maybe there's a history of dementia in your family. That would be something we want to know about and we'd want to address in the plan, whether it's through insurance or through just some segregated pot of money, something that's earmarked for this particular concern, and the time frame that we need to be cognizant of when we're building this plan. It's something, expense that you have next year is going to be different than an expense that you may never have, or you may have next year or 20 years later. There's going to have different investments, different types of accounts to address those concerns. So it just comes back to running a cash flow analysis and talking to a specialist so that they can first hear you out, listen to your concerns, and then understand a little bit more about your big picture of your plan and start to address some of those specific concerns based on your circumstances in your retirement plan.
That was all we had time for today. Any closing remarks before we end?
I think that's it. I know I get long-winded on these. I'm very passionate about this stuff, but I appreciate you all sticking in there with me.
We love it.
I hope you all have a good rest of your week. Everybody have a happy Thanksgiving. We're very grateful for the AT&T community and having helped us build our business over the last 30 years. We hope you all have a wonderful holiday and a good rest of the month. And feel free to give us a call if you have some interest in getting on mine or one of my colleagues' calendars before the end of the year to talk about some of these issues. Everybody have a good, safe rest of your week. We hope to talk to you all very soon. Thanks again.
Thanks, Tyson.